Claro.
Well, welcome everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to this third Down to Earth dialogue at the Laudato Si Research Institute. My name is Séverine Denelin, and I am the Director of International Development at the Institute. The Laudato Si Research Institute has been set up to bring together different traditions of intellectual inquiry to respond to the most pressing social and environmental challenges of our time. And it is my great pleasure today to bring in dialogue two people who have been working at the forefront of structural change in our economic systems. Dr. Gaël Giraud is a religious and priest of the Society of Jesus. Gaël has a PhD in applied mathematics and has recently finished a PhD in theology at the Centre Sèvres in Paris, in the political theology of the commons in the era of the Anthropocene. And before becoming a Jesuit, he worked for 2 years as a mathematics and physics teacher in Chad at a Jesuit high school. And he also worked as a scientific advisor for investment banks. And before embarking on a PhD in theology, he had been chief economist at the French Development Agency. And he is now the founding director of the Environmental Justice Program at the University of Georgetown. So welcome, Gaël, for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Alessandra Smerilli was due to be here tonight, but she sends her sincere apologies because she woke up ill this morning. So we wish her a very speedy recovery. But we are extremely grateful to have with us Dr. Florencia Locascio. She is Argentinian and based now in Rosario, where she works as a social communicator. She's been executive director of the organizing committee of the Economy of Francesco, which just finished last weekend and which was pushed forward by Pope Francis. And she's currently collaborating with the International Research Program on Democracy, Society, and New Economies at the University of Buenos Aires. And she's also working for the International Committee of the Economy of Communion, a network of businesses and people who seek to promote a new culture of fraternity in the economy. So we have about 45 minutes for the conversation. Gaël and Florencia will speak for 10 minutes each, and then we have a dialogue between them, and then we have about 20 minutes for questions from the floor. So if you have a question, please do write it at any point during the event in the Ask the Question section on the platform. So Gaël, open to you to share with us your insights about this new economy that we need in the light of the climate change crisis and other crises.
Thank you, Severine. So, Florencia, if you can help me and share your screen to show the slides. I apologize to everybody. It seems that my computer is not compatible with this communication system, so I can't share my screen with you. But very gently, Florencia suggested she would do it. So I just want you to show you a few slides to suggest some challenges that we have to face and that economics especially has to face. I should begin by reminding you that according to many of my colleagues, climate change actually is not an issue, in the sense that you have someone like William Nordhaus, who is the famous economist who got the Nobel Award 2 years or 3 years ago, who keeps repeating since 30 years that with an increase of the average temperature on Earth at the end of the century of about, let's say, plus 6 degrees, we should only experience minus 10% of the real GDP loss, minus 10%, which is approximately what we are going to experience now due to the lockdown, be it in the UK or in France. I don't know, frankly, about Argentina. But so minus 10% just for plus 6 degrees at the end of the century, it seems ridiculous. And I just want to convince you that it is. So here in this slide, you have a paper which has been published in Nature 3 years ago now, which is a projection in terms of, which is a climate projection, where you try to see where on Earth there will be combinations of heat and humidity that will be lethal, mortal for people at the end of the century. So if you look on the left side and you look here on the red curve, this is the curve corresponding to the so-called RCP 8.5, which is the most pessimistic scenario of the IPCC, which leads us to an increase of the average temperature of +4, maybe +5 degrees at the end of the century. So that's not even +6. And that's unfortunately the scenario along which we are now working, which means that if we keep following the business as usual scenario, then we will be on the track of this scenario. Now, on the left side, you see that if we follow this scenario, the red curve, then at the end of the century, there should be 1/2, 50% of land on Earth that will be concerned by more than 20 days per year of mortal combination of heat and humidity. Which sides of the population will be concerned by this? The answer is on the right. And as you can see, it's 75% of the population, provided, of course, people don't migrate. But of course, they will migrate. So the next slide, la próxima diapositiva, muchas gracias. On the bottom, you see the map and the distribution of the days within a year where people will be exposed to mortal combination of heat and humidity. So if it's dark red or brown, it means that potentially, essentially every day, every year will be such that people will be exposed to such mortal combinations. So the entire basin of the Amazon will be condemned, which means nobody will survive over there. You cannot survive just with air conditioning because, as you know, air conditioning is also polluting. So people will have to stop using air conditioning. And in addition to that, air conditioning is also provoking blackout in the power system if too many people try to use air conditioning at the same time. So the entire Amazon will be condemned, Central America, the basin of Congo, the Guinea Gulf, the littoral of India, and almost everybody in Southeast Asia. Also, very interestingly, if you see the yellow zone is a zone where 1 day over 3 people will be exposed to mortal combination of heat and humidity. And as you can see, this will be the case in the eastern coast of the US, and also the eastern coast of China, where you have very small cities like Shanghai, Shenzhen, etc. Therefore, there will be huge migrations. When the World Bank is approximately, he's saying that approximately 2.5 billion people could become climate refugees in the second half of this century. This is not an exaggeration. So the first point I want to mention is that we as economists, we have to realize how serious climate change is first, and to take into account in our viewpoint, in our perspective, the huge impact of climate change on people and on migration. There will be billions of climate refugees in the world in the second half of this century. Any economic perspective which does not take this into account, from my viewpoint, is just irrelevant. Let's go to the next slide.
It's not working.
So yeah, while it's coming, yes, the next slide is just to show you that I was just for the time being mentioning only combination of heat and humidity, but you could also think of hydro stress, that is the lack of drinkable water. And this now is a projection that has been realized by the World Resources Institute in Washington, DC, and it's not for the end of the century, but for 2040, which is just the day after tomorrow. And as you can see, now this time, we don't find the same places which are concerned, but the US are highly concerned, the north of Africa, Europe is concerned, and of course Central Asia and Australia. So just to give you an example, for the UK might experience something like a loss between -20 and -40% of drinkable water by 2040. The same story for France. So this might become an urgent matter even for Europe in the coming years. Not, of course, not mentioning Spain and Italy. The next slide, please. Now, if the next slide is concerned with extreme events, climate extreme events, like typhoons, droughts, floods, etc. Now you see the picture is completely different. Asia essentially is concerned, Indonesia again, Madagascar, but other places are not. So which means if we try to understand the economic impact of climate change, we have to disentangle various aspects like heat, humidity, lack of drinkable water, but also extreme events. And then the situation is completely different according to the way you try to understand this impact. The next slide, please. In addition to that, climate change is not the unique problem we have to face as economists, I believe, but also the growing scarcity of minerals. So this is taken from a paper of mine that I published together with a geophysicist a couple of years ago, 2017, where you can see the exponential increase in extraction of a number of minerals. So here you have the example of copper, zinc, and aluminum, but of course you have the same for cement, steel, etc., etc. The point, the takeaway of that is that if you show this to a geophysicist, he will just be horrified. He will just say, it's impossible that we keep extracting so many minerals from Earth, because these minerals are present in finite quantity, and the density of the reserves where we are extracting them is just increasing exponentially, is decreasing, sorry, exponentially. So the cost of extraction is increasing exponentially. In order to extract minerals, what do you need? You need water and energy. And then what's going on is that we have to think of a new type of industry, a green industry, a low-tech industry that does not use too much of minerals, and where all these minerals can easily be recycled, which means this should be the end of these kind of beautiful objects that you can see on my picture, because these objects, they contain at least 100 different minerals, and they cannot be recycled because it's too costly to recycle this. It's too miniaturized, so we need much simpler manufactured objects which are easy to repair and easy to recycle. Exactly the opposite of what we like today. So we have a new type of industry to invent. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. I don't have. Yeah.
Another
Please.
one?
Yeah, sure. Another one, please. Yes. Now, the fourth aspect. So the first one is heat and humidity. The second is the lack of water. The third is the lack of minerals. Especially, I should mention, of course, the question of copper. What we showed with my colleague is that we might reach the peak of extraction of copper before 2060 at the world level. And I know another team of researchers in Norway which did approximately the same kind of research as we did, and they concluded 2040. So they were even more pessimistic than we are. So copper is a big issue. But now the next point I want to mention is biomass, or biodiversity here. As you know, biodiversity is being destroyed by our current lifestyle. One way to understand it and to see where this occurs is to consider a thermodynamic measure of biodiversity, which is called NPP, the net primary productivity, or net primary production. It is the quantity of energy that is captured by biomass coming from the sun and transformed into carbon. So here in this map, what you see are the places where you have a lot of biomass, a lot of NPP. So if it's green, it means you have a lot of NPP. If it's brown, it means you just have a desert or no NPP at all. You can go to the next slide. Now, as you know, human beings are using and destroying a lot of biomass. So here you have the places where this takes place. And you see that Asia is a place where people consume, quote unquote, a lot of biomass. Also Indonesia again, and also Europe and the US. Next slide, please. Then the next question is, what is the balance? Are there places where people consume more biomass than they actually have in the neighborhood, maybe by importing biomass? So here, as you can see, if the color is more than yellow or red or purple, etc., then it means that you are in a deficit. You are consuming every year more than 100% of the biomass which is given by your neighborhood. So where does this take place? In Saudi Arabia, India, and China, essentially, and again in Indonesia on the Java Island. A little bit in Europe, a little bit and on the eastern coast of the US and Canada. So which means these regions are going to be in trouble once the ecosystems that are providing today the biomass that they are consuming will be destroyed. So they are very fragile, and there is a big issue, which is how to have a sustainable consumption, quote unquote, of biomass. So in a nutshell, to summarize all this, my viewpoint is that we have a kind of magic square, which might be turned into a nightmare if we don't do anything. And this should be the main focus of economists today, if they want to help us find solutions against these big challenges. A square with four points. The first one is energy. Obviously, we have to decarbonize our energy consumption and to shift towards renewable energies. The second one is water. I mentioned this earlier. The third one is minerals. And the fourth one is biomass. And it turns out that you need the 4 points, the 4 summits of the square in order to have all of them. In order to have one of them, you need the 3 others. Let me just give you an example. Tunisia and Morocco today are in a situation of panic, at least the government, because they have realized that they are already lacking water. I mean, there is not enough water for the agriculture in Morocco and Tunisia. So what they want to do is to desalinize the water from the sea, but desalinization requires a lot of energy. So they need energy to get water. Morocco has a lot of energy stemming from the solar power plant of Ouarzazate, but Tunisia doesn't have it. So Tunisia has a problem of energy, of access to water, because it doesn't have enough energy. Now, in order to have energy, you need more minerals. Let's say for PV roofs, you need a lot of minerals. That's one of the problems that we are facing today. And in order to have minerals, you need water and energy. And in order to have all of this, you need biomass, at least in order to give food to your people. So in a nutshell, my viewpoint is that the economy that we should focus on in a post-COVID world is an economy that should go down to earth, realize that the growing scarcity of natural resources is just the most important thing we have to think about. The last slide is an example of numerical simulations that I have done for the Stern-Stiglitz Commission, to which I contributed 3 years ago. It was a commission led by Nicola Stern and Joe Stiglitz, dedicated to the carbon tax. So I have run a number of simulations with a macroeconomic model, which is a nonlinear dynamical system, a little bit in the spirit of the Meadows report to the Club of Rome in 1972. And what we have shown is that due to climate change, if we don't do anything, we might experience degrowth in the last quarter of this century at the world level. GDP degrowth, not by design, but by disaster. Now, if on the other side, we change completely the lifestyle of people, we implement a green industry, we have, for instance, a large carbon tax at the world level, let's say something like 300 euros per ton by 2030, then we have a chance to escape from this disaster and to have a more prosperous future. So that's my big takeaway. At the macroeconomic level, we have to focus on these kind of things. At the meso and micro level, and I will stop here to give you the floor, Séverine. At the meso and micro level, my intuition, and these are also things on which I'm working now currently, is that we should also focus on the commons, to which my PhD in theology was dedicated, because private ownership is one of the main problems leading to this crisis. For instance, in the US, if you are the owner of your garden, and if it turns out that you have oil beneath the surface, then nobody can prevent you from extracting this oil and destroying the climate. So the absolutization of private ownership is one big problem. So the question this raises is, how can we impose constraints and limits to private ownership? And the second problem has something to do with public ownership and with the public sovereignty of a state. Let me just give you an example. When the Amazon forest is burning, and when President Bolsonaro refuses to take care of that, then he's committing a crime. Because if we lose the Amazon forest, if the Amazon forest becomes, let's say, a savanna in a couple of years, then this means that we're not going to experience plus 5 or 6 degrees of increase of the average temperature, but maybe plus 10 at the end of the century or in the next century. Plus 10 degrees is just the apocalypse. So the question is, who on earth today, according to international law, can constrain the sovereign state of Brazil to take care of the Amazon? Nobody. So this raises the question, how can we shape a new multilateralism, a new international law, rule of law, so that we can globally, collectively take care of our commons? The Amazon is a big global common. Health is a big common. Now we have realized this thanks to the pandemic. Climate is a big common. So this is the main question I think we as economists will have to fix. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gaël, for setting the scene and the task that lies ahead for all of us. And I have quite a few comments to make and further areas of development regarding governing the commons and the issue of climate refugees, which is totally underrepresented international law. There is no international treaties on climate refugees. Even the very term doesn't exist in international law. The issue of mining oceans, which is now going ahead very strongly in Southern Africa, in Asia, and there is absolutely no regulation about the mining of oceans. So I think what you say there is really very important. We can come back to that later on in the discussion. But I want to first to listen to what Florencia has to share about the event last week, and also giving us a lot of hope, because I think that what Gaël has presented was quite grim, that in 20 years' time, the UK will have lost 40% of its water capacity. But Florencia was at this event last week of the Economia Francesco with 2,000 young people sharing proposals about what can be done to change this economy that is destroying ourselves and destroying the planet. Florencia.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here with all of you, because I guess that if you are here, you are already convinced that we need to do something together, and that there is hope, and that's why we are here together. I'm, as they say before, I'm from Argentina, and I was in Italy when Pope Francis sent a wonderful letter to young people of all over the world, special to economists, entrepreneurs, and people that change makers, those who are already trying to change the economical system and to give answers to the cry of the earth and of the poorest of the world. He said that we were invited to make a commitment to start a process of change, a process of global change. So to this beautiful letter, many people answered with other letters that were the applications, and we received thousands of applications of young people that were already committed, as I say, people that were already running their own businesses, that were in the public places, as in the government of their cities, running social projects, spending their lives to give answers, to give hope. The process starts from young people that were the protagonists of this project. It was supposed to be an event in March, and then because of the pandemic, we had to postpone it, and it becomes a very long pre-event. We have 9 months to work together and to go deeper into the ideas, the proposals. We work in 12 thematic villages that invite us to rethink the economy, and as the Pope said, to give a soul to the current and the future economy, to rethink the economy in the different areas, finance and humanity. Which finance we need to support humanity, and not a finance that feeds itself. What's the role of the culture of care in the workplaces? What's the role of women in economy and women thoughts in economy? What about education and intergenerational work and justice? What about poverty and energy? Which relationship there are between them? So we go deep deep in these kind of challenges, putting all ourselves and inviting people that are already working on it, from like seniors that accompany our process. And we arrived to this event that was not only an event. Actually, it was an important step in our process. We already feel that we are part of a movement of people that commit itself and that feel part of a bigger community. And we have this encounter among us, with the speaker, with the people that bring great experiences, and also with Pope Francis, that deliver a wonderful message and encourage us. He said that we have to, the decisions and the actions that are running today will affect us directly. So we should get involved in decisions, or the history will pass us by. He was very powerful. Also, he talked about this process. He also talked about this economy of Francesco as a process, with 3 keywords that were vocation, culture, and covenant, pact. Vocation, that was the vocation of Assisi. As the crucifix said, as San Francis at that time, go and repair my house that is in ruin. We feel the same call. We feel this inner call that said, go repair my house, my common house, the management of our house resources, which is the economy. Go and repair the suffering that bad management of the common house is carrying on, like the people that is excluded of the possibility of enjoying our common house. So we feel this inner call with the spirit of San Francis, and we have to change the culture, he said, as the second keyword. We have to change different cultures. Our own culture, to change ourselves at the first, because if we start changing ourselves, our meter of influence, we will start transforming our businesses, our houses, our institution, our ideas in our university. So we have to change first ourselves, then the culture where we live, to propose new theoretical approaches, to propose new ways of education, new politics, and then the culture of the encounter, because we have this, he said, we cannot go alone. Nobody saves itself alone. We have to work together for this, even with people that doesn't think as we think, because it's our common challenge. We have to give common answers. So we have to really work for this culture of encounter, to go over the differences, to work together. And then he talked about a covenant, to put in practice, a covenant for life, to put in practice this approach of integral human development in our daily life, in our places of work, and then to change the structures when we will have the possibility. And it seems too big, but since we are still live, we still have the possibility to give something and to change something. And we don't want to be like Cain when he was asked, where was your brother? Where is your brother? We want to give an answer. We want to give personally an answer, and in a communitarian way as well. We want to be the anti-Cain people. When we will be asked, where is your brother? We want to say, it's here next to me, because we are together trying to go to a better society, to build a better society. So I finish now, and I leave the floor for the next step.
Thank you so much, Florencia, for such an inspiring talk about hope and this this call for vocation and change the culture. And you emphasize that the economy of Francesco is not an event. It's not an event that happened last week. It's a process. It's a movement in which we are all involved, and that will take years and years to take off, to flourish. I think that's really important. And this idea of that we have to be anti-capital as a community. And so on that note, I want to ask both of you, following on what Gaël said about governing the commons and the importance of finding these institutions to govern the commons. If you have any positive examples, are there anything, proposals that came from the meeting last week? I think, for example, of Chile, you mentioned, Gaël, that copper is going to run a scare in a couple of years. Chile is the main exporter of copper in the world. Chile has recently voted for a new constitution that's going to make water a human right, or public good, at least. Because you mentioned this private property. So far, water is a private property in Chile. So can you, both of you, do you have kind of examples of how this governing the commons is advancing, how we can have the institutions to manage our common home?
You want to begin, Florencia?
No, please.
Okay, thank you. Muchas gracias. I can give two examples, actually. One which does not come from last week, and another one which comes from last week. So let me begin by the first one. The first one is DNDI. Maybe I should write it here so that everybody can read it. DNDI, which is the acronym for Drugs for Neglected Disease Initiative. It is a network that has been launched in Geneva, in Switzerland, 15 years ago by doctors, actually I think French doctors, which tries to gather around the table both private labs from private pharmaceutical laboratories, states, sovereign states, and NGOs, in order to spread, distribute, and share therapies against diseases which are neglected by the private sector. One example being the hepatitis C in Egypt, which is devastating people in Egypt. The therapy against hepatitis C in Europe cost around 3,000 euros. And in Egypt, thanks to DNDI, it costs only, quote unquote, $400. So it's not free, but it's much less costly than in Europe. And how do they succeed in getting this? Well, by organizing the meeting, the negotiation, the collaboration between entities which usually never collaborate, which is not with each other, namely the private sector, the states, and NGOs. This is a way to organize health as a commons at the international level. And this, I believe, is a really very fascinating hybrid institution which might look like an alternative to what we have done so far, which doesn't work anymore, like the World Organization, to which nobody listened to. Nobody's listening to it. United Nations, the Security Council hasn't made any declaration since the beginning of the pandemic, nothing. So it was just actually hiding the leadership of the US. And since there is no more any leadership of the US, there is no United Nations anymore, quote unquote. It seems to me this kind of hybrid institution like BNDI is a very, very fascinating example of what we should build today. We need for that a lot of institutional imagination and a new way to collaborate, where we don't see the world divided like in black and white, divided between, let's say, private goods for the market, public goods for the state, and that's the end of the story, which is the old-fashioned way many economists used to look at the world. But we have to understand that commons, like health, need new institutions, and DNDI is an example of that at the international level. Now, the second example I would like to mention, which comes from last week, and actually from what happened in Assisi, with the economy of Francesco. This is a movement from Brazil, essentially stemming, if I correctly understood, from movements of people around the Unicinos University, Universidad de Unicinos, not so far from Porto Alegre. I can't pronounce it with the right Brazilian accent, I'm sorry for that, which is just beautiful, but you know. The main idea, the main intuition is that what we should do is promote women as leaders of movements connected with peasants without soil, you know, sin terra. Campesinos sin la terra, sin terra, no? And the idea is not just to do the same things that was done by the Theology of Liberation, you know, 30 years ago, but to promote women on this place, because they have understood that if you put women in the first place, it works much better. Which is also my experience. When I was the chief economist of the French Development Bank, there are a number of projects where I just said, you know, I agree with you and we are going to fund you, but under the condition that women are in the first place, because otherwise it's not going to work. A very simple example, we have promoted a lot of projects where a community could take care of the water plant as a common, actually. And this was very successful. Let me just give you an example in Bolivia, La Paz. In La Paz, in Bolivia, in 2016, experienced the very terrifying situation where they didn't have water anymore on tap during the summer in the center of the city. But in the suburb, the poor had organized themselves in small communities. Each community could take care of water as a commons, and they still had water during the summer. So it was very successful. So what we did at the French Development Agency is that we said, we agreed to put money on the table if you let women lead the project. So this initiative from Brazil seems to me very promising and seems to me very in the spirit of what Francesco is doing. I had an audience actually with Pope Francis early September, the 3rd of September, and essentially what he said, what was new to me, this was before the publication of Fratelli Tutti, you know, was we have to promote this condition of women, which is not explicit in Laudato Si. So I think this initiative is very typical of the economy of Francesco. I don't know what you think about it, from Florencia.
Yeah, those are wonderful examples. Maybe I don't have in mind experiences at the macro level, but I see very wonderful experiences at the micro level of people that are aware of the government of commons cannot be managed by someone that thinks that had the answers, but all the population, all the community, all the main actors had to be involved. And that's the example of a business in the southern part of Argentina, in Tierra del Fuego, a touristical business that is run by a guy of the Economy of Francesco movement. And he said the fair action that we take in our business was to involve indigenous communities of our lands in the process of development of touristical products, because we have to grow with, not grow for, and sometimes those, as Gaël was saying, those who are there has the knowledge and key ideas for a correct government of the commons. Is the case as well of a business that produce coffee in Mexico in an organic way, respecting the lands, but involving people that were disadvantaged. Or many of this what I saw in these young people is that they come with I don't want to say something very wrong, but like a developed intelligence to see the commons. It seemed natural for Lily, that was 13 years old, to clean all the plastic of Thailand in her country and to start advocacy. And she started at 7 years old to do that. And she like started a movement around her, or for these young people that participated were 17 and were running programs to protect water. So I think that the most, or to protect seeds, that was something that we treat in the event, that some communities has not access to good food anymore, to good seeds anymore. So and food is very important because it's not only the way to survive, but it's our contact with nature. So we have to protect this common, and we really need, I will bring something about Laudato Si teaching or ideas. intergenerational justice is not only to see in the future generation, but include the new generation in the thoughts, in the decisions, in the ideas, because it's our future, but it's our present as well. And then to involve those that are already living the situation to look for the solutions and to look for ideas on how to manage and how to solve our common problems. That's just to try. Another interesting example about land that you were mentioning here in Argentina, I was seeing the events online with other 5 young people from my city. One of them is working in people against trata de personas, how do you say, exploiting?
Trafficking.
Human trafficking, yes.
Human trafficking, yes.
Yes, so they were like facing many situations, very hard, and he told us that they are keeping the lands of those who were exploiting people, trafficking people, and giving the land to that workers that were trafficked or exploited before, because they already had the knowledge to manage the land in a communitarian way. So there are many ways, many wonderful examples, but I think that we are in a time of transition, because there are 2 economies, or more than 2 economies, living together. So we have the mainstream that see the earth as orange, and try to keep all the juice of the orange, and we have this new economy that is flourishing all over the world with with small seeds, but live seeds, that is changing the way we see and we act the economy, and we relate with the common house.
Thank you very much, Florencia. I've got here 2 questions that I could put them together. One is on the role of India and China. They always appear on the map, but what are we doing in the West to counterbalance these countries? And do we need to counterbalance them, or do we need to allow these seeds at the bottom level to grow? Because both of you were emphasizing the seeds growing at the bottom level. So what do we do with India and China, basically, and the issue of democracy, to promote this sustainability and to enable people to take on these initiatives, because these initiatives in an authoritarian government are maybe not as easy to take. And this question about Fratelli Tutti Fratelli Tutti seeks to tread a narrow line between abstract globalization and defense localism. So with the context of nationalistic retrenchment, can we really be citizens of the world? Can we really be thinking about our neighbors overseas? And so how can we create an economy that navigates between the local and the global?
So these are big questions, Celine. Fortunately, we have 3 days to answer these questions. Regarding China and India, I would say, from my viewpoint, the situation is completely different, in the sense that there are many initiatives in India, at least I'm aware of people trying to coordinate themselves and to take care of the commons. You have, for instance, you have, I know NGOs of women who coordinated in order to create a bank for seeds, in order to protect the seeds of many villages. You have many initiatives for the poorest population in India, etc., etc. At the same time, of course, I know perfectly that Narendra Modi is destroying the country, is constructing a wall between Bangladesh and India in order to prevent refugees from Bangladesh to join India when Bangladesh will be underwater by 2050 approximately. So, and there is a war just right now as we are talking between China and India on the northeastern part of the boundary, the frontier between the 2 countries. So I'm not saying that Modi is not a big danger, and he's actually feeding a kind of civil war of Hindus against Muslims and Christians. But at the same time, there are very many beautiful initiatives. So my viewpoint is that we have to work under the sovereign state, because with the sovereign state today, it's very complicated. We have to wait for a new democratic turn, I mean, in India. But at the same time, in order not to lose too much time, we have to engage with a lot of all these beautiful initiatives. I guess Vandana Shiva is a beautiful person. I had a round table with her. She's just fantastic. And she's the kind of intellectual in India with whom we can work and coordinate. With China, it's a completely different story. It seems to me we first have, we Western people, we have to understand and to realize how dangerous the relationship with China is. The geopolitics of the Silk Roads is not a pacific way, to make business with people. It's a way just to exploit the soil in Africa, the energy which is not in China, in the continent, and to redirect all these resources, the natural resources in China. Right now, Switzerland is
sorry, we've been cut. So before while waiting when he comes back, did you say just a few words on India and China and on the importance of democracy? What you've seen last week and in your work?
Actually, I think that is a very difficult question for me, and it's a I don't know. I don't know how to answer to that. I really believe that our politics and has to be redefined in terms of development, in terms of global solidarity, in terms of justice, and we really need nations and globalizations are in tension all the time. So we cannot manage commons as they were part of the nation. Argentina itself cannot govern its own commons since our commons of all over the world. So we really need new agreements. We have to dream a new way of manage at the global level. We cannot restylish what we already have. So that's my point of view, but I have not specific answers to this question.
Maybe that's what you're doing as well with the region, like REPAM, the Red Eclesial par la Amazonia, and have these extra nation state networks, because I think in terms of biomes and not in terms of nation states.
Yes.
Gaël?
Yes, and this is very related. I can see the Gaël return. Yeah, it's very related with the second question. They say they talk about this nationalism and globalization and this tension. In my country, I come from the south of the world, and where there is a political point of view that tries to nationalize everything and to close ourselves. Actually, I think that is very dangerous to try to save ourselves alone, because we already are connected in ways that we were not connected before. So it's not possible to think ourselves outside. But at the same time, we have to rethink cooperation among countries. We have to rethink international finance institutions. We have to rethink solidarity among countries, because we cannot anymore create more inequalities with the way we relate with each other. So relations have to be based on subsidiarity, have to be based on respect, and have to be based on common good. So in this way, we have to be connected. We cannot exclude ourselves of the dialogue with other countries. And then we have some challenges that we have as generation. And we have a common family, a human family. So these dialogues have to be, as you said before, taken together.
Thank you. Gaël?
Yes. Can you hear?
Yeah. We just have 2 minutes because I know we are already over time. Just if you want to closing comment. Oh, right. I'm afraid he's frozen again.
Gaël, maybe if you can hear us, you can write your comment on the chat.
See if I get my camera.
Severin, your microphone.
Thank you. Sorry. Without saying you are muted. I'm very sorry that Gaël's connection is freezing, but at least I think we've been able to listen to most of what he had to say, and there'll be opportunities for later exchanges, I'm sure, later on. So thank you very much for joining us. Next week, we will deal at greater length with this issue of migration. We already raised the theme of climate refugees, and that migration will be a huge issue in the next 20 years. So we have the head of the Jesuit Refugee Service, Sarah Thetter, coming to speak next week with Matthew Gibney, who is Professor of Migration Studies. So thank you very much, Florencia, for joining us. It's such a last minute. I called you this morning, so thank you. And to Gaël for a very, very stimulating and very inspiring talk. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.